All right, we are live at 5. It's another one of my LinkedIn lives that I'm doing. It's 5 p.m. in Dublin, and I want to welcome everybody today. Today, I'm chatting to Paul Lanigan from Sandler. So, welcome, Paul. I'm just going to do I think a lot of people on this call. We have about 290 people registered, and I'm sure a few more people will jump on. So, a really good turnout today. So, I appreciate that. Say hi in the comments, ask a question. We're going to be very informal today, but Paul probably doesn't need much of an introduction. He's a well-known sales trainer. He's involved. He's got a great podcast called The Leadership Mindset. Today, I'm going to turn the table a little bit on him and ask him the questions. And I'm going to start with a difficult question. He's not sure what it's going to be, but we'll get into it shortly. But Paul describes himself as a software engineer who got lost and ended up in sales. Since bringing the Sandler Training franchise to Ireland in 2002, Paul sold and trained to some of the world's most successful companies, including Oracle, IBM, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, etc. And I think there'll be a lot of those folks on the calls today. He's also written a great book, which I've read, called Soft Tales and Hard Asses, One Salesman's Discovery to the Art of Storytelling. More about motorbikes than anything else, but great book, good read, and good way to sort of get into sales. And I think really right now, Paul, the next thing is AI. Everyone's talking about it. And I just wanted before I get you to say hi or whatever, Paul. It's interesting. I've spent the last couple of days. I spend a lot of time with CTOs, VPs of engineering. They are the most sold to people on the planet. They get so many cold emails. And when I mentioned this talk, they said, geez, the last thing we need is AI now starting to cold sell us. So you're going to tell us a little bit more about AI and sales, and probably not about writing cold emails. So let's get into it. How are you doing? Just tell us a little bit about,
I'm
give us a quick intro.
I'm doing good. Well, you said it all. I'm involved in sales training. Have been for a long time with Sandler, and I guess in the last year, like so many other people, the AI thing, that squirrel has caught my attention, and I've gone down that rabbit hole. But to your point about the CTOs, the thing I see a lot, and I've been guilty of it myself, when you see AI first and you're playing with it, you're kind of thinking, "Ooh, I could get that to do my emails." And then you realize that's not what it's for. That you're taking the best of what's human and you're trying to replace that with AI by doing emails, by connecting with people rather than tasks, processes, systems, workflows. That's where it really excels, and that's where people can get the most out of AI.
Yeah, and I think that leads us on to our first question. Is I suppose beyond the email automation, how can AI be leveraged to enhance the prospecting process,
Mm,
particularly in B2B sales?
mm. Well, there's a few ways. Like sales, particularly B2B sales, particularly with longer selling cycles where you have lots of processes, internal and external processes, where there's gaps in processes that are manual. You can bridge that. You can make them more efficient, more effective. It's almost like you have, Microsoft call it, their co-pilot that's working with you to do the tasks in the background that sometimes you don't have time to get to. Sometimes because there's lots of them, maybe you trip up and you don't get around to it or you forget about it. And having that system in the background working away where you can bring different tools, different systems, technology systems together and make them work more effectively, I find is a really powerful way. So that's one side. Other side to look at it are around tools, things that and how I use them, for example, are in a couple of areas. One is, I'm always keen that when I'm preparing for a sales call, how do I do that most effectively? You can get a form, a pre-called planner, for example, but wouldn't it be better, instead of filling out paper-based forms, static forms, that you could have a conversation with a large language model that could, when you're on your way to a meeting, say, okay, who are you meeting with today? How are you prepared? Tell me about this. Tell me about that. And then at the end of that conversation, they're able to say, "Ooh, you forgot about this. Here's a red flag. Here's something you need to think about. Pull over," right? So you can do that, and you can be much more effective that way. And again, I think there's a personality thing. Personally, I don't like filling out forms. I feel that's like admin. But having a conversation, something to prepare me, as if it's somebody's writing with me and are kind of preparing me for this particular call. So if you look at it as ways of preparing, fine-tuning, another area that I've developed in these, we can get into the hows later on around GPTs versus prompts, all that kind of stuff. But in terms of the what and the why, if you think about tools that maybe, for example, here's 3 very quick examples of how I use it. One is, if I've got call notes from a call, I can put that into a tool, like an AI tool, and it will come out and it'll say, okay, based on this, here's the information that you got, here are the gaps. And of course, when I say here's what you've got, here's what your gaps, that's according to a methodology. For me, it's obviously the Sandler methodology. And I can say, here's some red flags, here's some gaps, here's some insights from it as well, here's some areas to improve. So you're using it to I guess like a blind spot tool. You can use it also, so that's for notes. Maybe I don't have notes. Maybe I've just got off a call, and instead of sitting down to write notes and figure it out, I can have a tool that's asking me questions. Again, to a methodology. So it's asking me who I was with, maybe a little bit about their personality style, a little bit what was my upfront contract, what were the different levels of pain, did we discuss money, where is it going to come from, etc., etc. And the goal of that is to make sure I have no blind spots, that I've covered all my bases. It's the kind of thing you do if you had a really good coach with you who could spend time with you after you got off every call, which of course is unrealistic in the real world. And it's unrealistic that we're going to hold ourselves sometimes accountable for that as well. We're busy, we want to get onto something else. So this is making sure, like a pilot does with a checklist, making sure that there's no blind spots. I've not overlooked anything. So that's another area maybe that I can do that. Here's another one that I've started to use recently that I found really powerful, is that I can record a call, a sales call with a prospect, take the transcript of that call, dump it into the tool, and then it will summarize it. There's nothing special in that. But what it'll do then as well, it'll say things like, oh, according to the methodology, you skipped over, maybe you didn't do a really good upfront contract, for example. And it'll tell me that. It'll say you got level 1 pain, level 2, but you really didn't get to level 3. You didn't touch on money at all. You didn't touch about what investments need to be made. And here's a rating for you. You've got a 6 out of 10. And by the way, here's how you get to 8, which is maybe your minimum standard. And here's how you get to a 9.5. And it'll do that for you, pointing out your blind spots, etc. The interesting thing I found about that was that if it's telling you this on several calls, it's you. You can't ignore it. It's telling you. And what I also found, it's a lot easier to take that on the ego side. It's a lot easier to take it from a tool like that that's just between us than it is when I have a human telling me that, hey, listen, you really sucked on those calls. You really need to do better. I can take that a lot easier.
Well, Paul, I'm really getting excited and interested in this now. I remember back in the days, even as a sales director, we would go to meetings, and I'd go with one of our field sales engineers or field sales folks, and we would always say on the way to the meeting, I'd switch off the radio and I'd say, right, what do we want to get out of the meeting? What is the output? What are we trying to get? And then after they would get annoyed with me because I just love to go into what do we want to get? I'd really want to understand the plan. So we touched on it. And then at the end of the meeting, we'd do the debrief. What did we miss? What did we skip? So what you're saying is that through chat, because I think everyone's aware of chat, and they're using AI to certain extents, and they're starting to see the benefits. But what you're saying is you're actually engaging in conversations. You're getting to have that pre-brief, debrief type of engagement. So now I'm really intrigued in terms of the how, and maybe we should jump into that now. But I suppose, would there be any other areas, I suppose, that, in terms of prospecting or finding opportunities? Maybe we can just get into the tools a little bit now.
Yeah, well, again, when it comes to automated systems, you can use workflow and tie it together using AI, for example, to build databases. Here's an example. Let's say you've got an ad campaign on LinkedIn, and this concept of friction, that the more information you ask for a prospect in exchange for, say, some lead magnet, the more information, the more friction there is, the less likely they are to fill in the details. Well, if it's a LinkedIn form, for example, all I need is their LinkedIn URL. Now, you might ask them for their other email as well, because typically LinkedIn email and their work email are different. But what I can then do is, once they fill in that form, that triggers an automated workflow, which using a tool will go off then to LinkedIn, scrape all their information, not just their email, not just their name and the company, but also their headline, their summary, what's their experiences, what skills they have. It can get a really rich picture. I can then use that to send some information, go back and say, listen, thanks for getting in touch. You were looking for this, here's something else. Based on your job, your profile, might it make sense to do this? And so you have that, again, co-pilot, but a sales co-pilot doing that first touch. Not salesy, just more of a service type bot that's working away in the background, but can be really, really quick. And at the same time, when they do that, can send me a WhatsApp message to say, oh, by the way, this person has just downloaded it. The AI have sent them this. Here's a good next step for you. Here's their number. Why don't you give them a call?
So
here's an example of that.
Are you using just ChatGPT to do this? Are you using templates? Like what is the mechanism?
I'm using a few things. So for example, there's a couple of great tools. One is called LinkedIn Helper for getting information from LinkedIn. Another one, which I think is probably even better, is called Phantom Buster, and that's a great one. So that can sit listening for somebody who downloads something on it or puts their details into a LinkedIn ad. So it's just sitting there waiting 24 hours a day. As soon as somebody does it, it's on them. That's the other thing. It's there 24 hours a day. You could be on holidays. You could be on the weekend. It will send the information straight away. And so it's sitting there, and then it can go off to the LinkedIn, get that information. I take that information then into ChatGPT because it's clumpy, it's raw. You can put it in a spreadsheet, but it still needs processing. So for ChatGPT can say, take this information and tell me what insights you can gain, what type of personality this person might have, what are their interests. You can base that on the schools they went to, who they follow, what their experiences are, for example, what languages they speak. So there's a lot of raw data that you need to extract some insights from. That's where ChatGPT comes in, for example, in all of that. And then I can take that information and put that into an outbound message back to them and to WhatsApp to me. I'm using Zapier. There's another tool called Make, which are very good at kind of stitching all of those elements together. But at the heart of it is ChatGPT, which helps me make sense of the information.
So earlier on in the call, I said you're a software engineer that ended up in sales, and that's probably your need to tinker and play with things. I mean, I see Andrew has just put a comment up on the post there saying that you're a master at just jumping into the boat and figuring stuff out. For a lot of sales folks, that might be quite tricky. They might feel quite intimidated by using the tools. Yeah. I mean, especially when you start connecting Zapier and the if this then that type tools. But I think it's becoming a lot more. It's a lot easier just seeing how you can actually, even on a basic level, just I'm going to meet this contact, put the contact LinkedIn details in, get some information back. And then I suppose back to the CTO that doesn't like to get sold to. What you're suggesting now is actually going to make that sales process more frictionless so that when that CTO does get a call, it's not a bumbling salesperson on the call trying to find that win or that need, that salesperson's coming across very professional because they know exactly what the pain point might be or how to actually engage that prospect's attention straight away.
Yeah. And there's other simple little things as part of that process. Maybe when somebody downloads something, maybe I want to go on their LinkedIn profile and send a request message to them or follow them. And I can do that automatically as well. And not just to send them one of those bog standard built-in messages, but send them a customized message. So it could be, hey, Allan, I noticed you downloaded. Look, don't know if it's going to be of any value or not at this stage. But look, why don't we connect in the meantime and we can start a conversation when you're ready. That kind of, softly, and it can do all of that for you. You don't have to worry.
Yeah, it's a fine line though. You've got to really configure the AI in the right way to do that, because there's nothing worse than getting those email. The minute you accept the connection, you almost know that there's going to be this default vanilla, 100%. Pitch slap, if that's what you want to call it.
100%, and that's why these tools have delays in them. You can put in any amount of delay you want. Put it in a delay. Say, look, noticed yesterday. You say, you looked for this. Thought it might be a just good idea in the meantime to why don't we connect? Something like you would ordinarily. The key thing with all of this is, what would I do ordinarily if I had a load of extra time or free time on my hands? What would I do? Would I connect with them? Yeah. Well, then why not automate it then? And how would I do that? Automate that. That's the key thing. There's a danger, and I'm guilty of this myself, is what can the tool do? And then follow that. That's a mistake.
Now, if you're a small business or you're doing your own business development, the automation's important. But how are you finding what is the feedback you're getting from reps in companies? Are their management teams welcoming automation? Are they allowing it? Are they encouraging it? Like, what is it? How are you finding it in the market at the moment in terms of, great, we've got a number of people on this call that potentially are going to walk off this call saying, wow, we can do all of these cool things. Will they be allowed to
Yeah.
do them? And is there a bit of pressure there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag. So I've heard feedback people don't like. For example, I got to take call notes from a customer and put that in. There's a fear that that's now public information, and it could be. You have to be careful. There's little switches, little check boxes to make sure that it's not retained information. For example, there are ways around it, but you do need to know what you're doing and to test it. And if unsure, ask. So that's there. Then of course there's systems. The systems I use, like HubSpot, for example, or LinkedIn. I have full access to all of those tools myself. I don't need to ask for permission to connect
Yeah.
with them to go for an API.
Yeah.
Now that said, one of the beauties of something like a Zapier, for example, it doesn't necessarily always need an API. It depends on what you're trying to do. But it's designed for dummies, essentially, to make it really easy, so you don't need those technical skills. But it is something that you may want to check. It's like everything else. The bigger the company with more policies and
Yeah.
et cetera, the more you need to kind of maybe sit down with somebody and map out what you want to do with it and get their buy into it and why it's going to help the organization, et
Yeah.
cetera. Yeah.
And I mean, it's certainly something that I preach every day. It's all about putting in the operational playbooks and making sure you're working with your company to say, we can actually get very good insights by using the AI bots, by gathering call information, but we'll follow the right process. We'll anonymize names, we'll anonymize companies, and we'll focus on maybe industry or high
Yeah.
level. So I think the message here is, you have to work with the various teams and within the confines or the constraints of the company that you're working in. I've got an interesting question here. What role does AI play in competitive analysis and market intelligence to give salespeople an edge over the competition? I know you've touched on it slightly in terms of, the pre-sales call check, but what other roles do you see it playing?
Yeah, so here's an example of something I did. I got halfway through making a video on this. I never finished it. I got distracted with something else. But probably something I'll come back to, which is around account planning, for example. So let's say there's an organization that I want to get into and I want to do my research. I did one on Stripe, and I picked that because the two Collison brothers, there's any number of videos. They like to go on podcasts, and that's a very modern thing where they'll go on podcasts or they'll speak on YouTube, and you can get a ton of information on that. So what you can do is just get a transcript of those videos, ingest them, take out all the duplication, distill it down to the key insights. I can go on their website, which I did, got some of their financial data, got some of their strategic statements that they had, mushed it all together and said, what are the key strategic initiatives of this company that's going to be important as part of your account plan? And then how do I adapt my pitch, or my elevator pitch, if you like, my messaging to that, so that it's consistent and it feels like it was made to order. That's where it can be really, really good, and it can do all of that work. Could somebody do that on their own? Yeah, but that would take a ton of time, and it's hard to hold all that data in your. That's in your head. That's where these large language models, ChatGPT is one of them. Claude 3 now has come out as another one. Google, what's it? Not Gemini. What's it called? It'll come to
The
me.
Bard.
Well, no, since then I think it's Gemini now. They're calling it.
Okay.
They moved on. So Bard is it's moved on. But again, that is a tool. They're really, really good for processing mass amount of information. Now, here's a caution. So, for example, I mentioned earlier about the idea of using a methodology as a framework or as a mold for gaining insights. I'm getting into the how now, rather than using, say, bare prompts into ChatGPT.
Mm.
Because if you do that, let's say I want to say, how consistent is this information with Medic or with Sandler, for example? It will then go off and it'll take its understanding of Sandler, which is
Yeah.
not real. And I've tested this, and then I've asked it. It's a great thing about ChatGPT. You can interact with it and say, where did you get this information from? And it'll say, oh, we visited a website, right? That's not good. The great thing then in where you've got GPTs, which are like customized tools, is that you can upload documents. So for example, with Sandler, I have a ton of documents that are uploaded. And therefore, when it's assessing my information, either my calls transcript or my notes that I put in, it's referencing the standard template and content to see what's missing. And here's where it's getting in, and this is only just a hot off the press only a couple of days ago, where they were testing Claude 3, and it's called the needle in the haystack test. So this is where third-party testers want to break these things. And they put, like Claude's context window is massive. That means you could upload several books.
Okay.
And they uploaded all of these technical books and history books, just junk stuff, right? Just content. And in the middle of all of this, thousands of pages, they put in this one line that says, pizzas are nicer with pineapple on it. And then what they did is, they were questioning and said, what's the best way to make pizza? What's the best topping for pizza? Now, that's a great test. And sure enough, it comes back and it says pineapple. But then, get this, it came back and it says, by the way, that piece of information is a little bit out of context with all of the other information that's in here. I suspect it was put in there to test me. That's no joke.
Wow,
Now,
that's impressive. I mean,
that is really impressive.
I get what you're saying there. I mean, I've actually, you run your searches and you get information based on proven methodologies. I work with companies that I help scale, and they use the scaling up program or the entrepreneurial operating system. And you can go in there and you can get good information on that. But you really have to question how that information is coming in and how relevant it is for the context. But then I've also gone and taken notes from facilitating a meeting, and I've taken lots of notes, bullet points, very badly written, raw data bullet points with first names only. And I've uploaded that and said, formulate this based on the following strategy, as in this is the direction that this team need to go on. Remove the names and turn it into paragraphs. And it brings the information that I've captured, relevant information in. And that's pretty powerful as well. So just a reminder, I mean, we kind of planned to go on for about 30 minutes, but we're happy to go on a little bit longer. Feel free. There's a lot of people on this call. Pop a few questions, comments in there. Paul actually mentioned to me before the call, he has a number of templates. Now, if you use GPT-4, I think he can verify, which is a paid version, you're able to upload templates. And that's where it really gets powerful. So if you're a super user, unlike me, and you're on number 4 or version 4 or a paid version, and you're looking for some templates, just comment in the site and say, hey, help. And just an invite as well. I mean, a number of the connections here may not know me. Feel free to reach out, connect with me, engage. And if you aren't connected to Paul, please do. If you're in sales, you have to connect in. His content is very good. But yeah, so any other questions, please throw them in. Paul, another question for me. The impact on AI on negotiation and objection handling with B2B sales scenarios. I like that negotiation piece. I mean, are you going to get AI now to go and negotiate for a customer?
No, never. It can help you prepare for your negotiation, but a big part of negotiation is certainly when you're across the table from somebody, is your presence, what they believe. And it can be a game of poker. Not literally, but maybe, like, and therefore you don't want a tool to go and negotiate on your behalf like that. Now, are there places you could use it? Yeah, I'm thinking big picture, and I'll give you an example on objection handling. If you go into ChatGPT and you ask it to role play objection handling with you, and you say, okay, you're the seller, I'm the buyer, and here's my objection. I'm busy right now. The GPT takes that literally, and it'll say, when are you free? And it doesn't take into account that could mean anything else, right?
Yeah, I'm busy sometimes means PFO basically, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the key thing now, you can break it and make it work, but you have to, for example, I don't want to get bogged down into the psychology, but there's these different things called transactions. So when we're operating at different levels. So when, we're operating at a surface level, which means it is what we mean it to, or then below it, there's a kind of an ulterior motive below that, and it's a different, what's called a transaction. And so if you go into ChatGPT, and I've done this, and say, okay, are you familiar with transaction analysis, which is the body, the psychology behind communication? And it'll say, yes, I am. And it is. It's really, really good. It understands it. You say, okay, there's different types of transactions in a negotiation. One of them is where, the buyer doesn't mean what they mean something else. And you ask it, what type of transaction is this? It'll come back and say, that's an ulterior transaction. Then you say to it, well, look, in objection handling, a lot of them can be this, or they can be discounting, which is another technical term I don't want to get into. But if you teach it that it's actually, it's not everything you're hearing, then it can actually distill it down to a very fine level, but you really have to work hard at it. I suspect it will get there one day, there's no question about it, but at the moment you have to be really careful that it's really good at processing data. But where we get into the where somebody says, well, how much? I'm not going to pay that much. And behind them, everything is falling apart and they need your services like you can't believe. But you're bluffing. You're playing a game because you don't want to be vulnerable and you don't want to be taken advantage of. It's not so good on that. It doesn't get tonality. And that's an important part of communication. And that's where I'm glad you brought this up, because I think as humans, there's areas where AI, whether it's a large language model like ChatGPT, or it's a tool that it's an avatar, a facsimile of you in the video, or it's voice cloning, which is amazing, is what it does. It does that better than humans. And if it's not there, it will be there soon, right? But if you look at what makes humans really, really, really good and different, and I don't get that we're actually going to be replaced, is in that humanity, that touch, and by that understanding also of the tonality, the body language, the gesture, the micro expressions. It's not there. And therefore, if you look at where we should double down in the Salesforce, in the sales process, and really get better and more skilled at, it's in those areas. And then use the AI where it's better is in other areas. And then when we work both of those together, you got a dynamite proposition. But if we try to replicate what we're good at with AI, it won't do a great job. And if we try to replicate that what it's good at, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. It's complementary, right? And
Yes.
The human's touch is so important. I mean, I was actually at a talent summit earlier, the HR talent summit that happens every year in Dublin at the convention center. I was there this morning, and one of the speakers spoke about saying AI is not going to replace you, but people that understand AI are going to replace you. And I think that was such an important piece, because it's a new skill that we have to level up. You wrote your book back in 2014, and you were talking about the art of storytelling. This is a new art, and this is a new art that people need to learn and understand. So maybe tell me about, and I see there's some questions in here. Are there good frameworks? This is from Broners. I hope I got your name pronounced correctly. But are there any cheat sheets, where like a top 10 tools to use for doing selling on AI steroids? So I think you mentioned that you have a couple of templates or potentially that if people commented or connected in on this on the LinkedIn feed, that you would be happy to share. But anything that you want to share now in terms of templates that you're using now that you could are really easy to upload or implement?
Yeah. So I've seen these cheat sheets, and I hate them because it's just tons and tons of data, and then people don't know what they're looking for, how to use them, etc. And it's generic, and that's poor, and I'll tell you why. Um, I think people need to learn how to prompt, because to get a really, really good answer from any large language model, and I'll just say ChatGPT generically, is you got to ask it a great question. And to ask a great question, you really have to think first about, what do I want? And cheat sheets don't do that. You got to, and so therefore, if you do it well, it's actually training you to formulate great questions, which then become available to you when you're face to face with somebody. And that's a real skill in itself. And if you don't get the answer you're looking for, it forces you to go back and think, well, actually, yeah, I didn't ask that question really well. I was ambiguous in that term. Maybe I need to. And that's the great thing about large language models. You can go back and adjust it, and it won't judge you, and it'll help you get better. That's the great thing.
Yeah.
So learning to prompt, and so here's a really good takeaway. I wish I made this up myself. I didn't. It's a nice acronym. It's like do it right, RIGHT. And so when
Okay.
you're prompting, tell it what its role is. You are an experienced copywriter, for example, or you're a sales coach. Tell it its role. That's the R. I is give it in the instruction. I want you to. Goal. You'll know you're successful when. H is how. I want you to do it step by step. And T is the target audience. This is for sales leaders in pharmaceutical industry, whatever it is. And that's a very powerful one. There's one variant of that, which I like too, is called bright. You just add a B in front of it, which is the brand voice. So it's the persona of it in terms of how you want it to express. I don't tend to use that too much because I like to play around with what comes back to me anyway. But if I was writing something substantive, I'd probably want to think more about the brand voice as well up front. And again, if I'm writing it, that is the brand voice. But if I was doing it on behalf of somebody or an organization, that's something I'd want to put more thought into. So either bright or right it's a great memory hook for writing great prompts.
I like that. I like that. And specifically the right piece, the role, who are you talking to? How are you talking to? It's the same when we chat to or we ask questions to, our family members. We will position that question in the right way. So it's all about asking the right questions. I mean, that's sales 101, isn't it? It's going in there,
Yeah,
not necessarily selling without actually understanding the customer. It's
yeah,
asking
and
questions. It
yeah.
reminds me, I think I might have mentioned to you before, Paul, we see each other from time to time. And I went in there and I didn't meet the customer where they were. So I kind of came in with an idea but didn't prep enough. And I started asking the wrong questions. And I got myself flustered. I managed to turn the call around within about 10 minutes and get back to a potential follow-up meeting, which is where we needed to get to. But I didn't ask the right questions. And it's so important. And you learn, you're always learning. So I think if anything, this is it's a great tool to learn how to ask the right questions to get the output. I'll put a note in the LinkedIn around that bright acronym because I think it's bright and right. In terms of the B part, the brand voice, give me a quick example of how you might use that.
Oh, it's really around the tone. So I wanted professional, I wanted casual, I wanted concise. It's so how do I want this expressed? That's all that is. There's no rocket science to it. So I'm not getting too deep into what brand colors
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so on like that. But there is a brand voice for most brands. Again, it depends on whether it's you as an individual or not. For example, I've often used it, and it'll come out with maybe some hyperbolic language. Everything is fantastic or great, or it'll use "Hey, dude," it'll use maybe
Yeah.
West Coast language, and I go back and go, "No, no, 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 pull it back a little bit, dial up." And I can say that. I'd say, "Listen, dial back the West Coast vibe." And give me something
Okay.
real, and it gets it. It'll say, "Oh, it's always apologizing too much," and then
Yeah.
it'll go back and it'll give you something. And you go, "Yeah, I like that." And then you can. Here's a tip. Then when you get it the way you want it, and it sounds right, go back and say, how would you describe this? And it'll come back and break that down. I didn't know this, but there's different categories when you break down tonality. Oh God, I can't even remember most of them now. But pacing of it, short and long sentences. That's another one. You can ask it to vary the length of the sentences. And it breaks it down into how that voice is expressed in writing. And there you can store that. And then when you go back the next time, you say, this is how I want it expressed.
Okay, so you can store and save and then reuse those prompts.
Yeah.
So because it does take some time to think out the right prompt. And I've tested it with building, PowerPoints. I've, got the tone right and everything, but I hadn't thought about that potentially if you're engaging or even preparing for a call, because,
Mm.
the assistant, the AI assistant, actually can give you the template that you can do to practice before an actual call. So it's still you doing the actual call, but you're just being prompted in the right way.
Yeah.
Paul,
Here's
we've
one for you
gone.
that I just,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I just go very briefly. Here's one. If you're talking to finance people, you might want to use different vernacular than you're talking to IT. And if you're particularly in a land and expand type of account, and you've got to have the language of different departments, that might be an area as well where you can take the same messaging, and rather than send out a generic email to everybody, you could adapt it to the different constituents.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think the cultural nuances as well. Different people in different parts of the world engage differently. So figuring that out and being able to make sure that the prompts are right from that perspective. We could go on for hours, and I'm sure there's other questions that'll probably come in. Please, to everybody, we've gone just 35 minutes. I normally do wrap up after around 30 minutes. So we've got a bit longer. Please feel free to reach out to us. Paul is a world-class sales trainer, coaches sales teams one-on-one, coaches leadership teams or sales leaders. And using the Sandler proven system. So a lot of you may know that. I have a business called Saltwater Consulting, and I help companies scale well. So I didn't want to talk too much about what I do, but feel free to connect in with me. We're in the process of helping companies scale, whether that's a sales team or an operational team. I really appreciate you jumping on, particularly the audience today. It is after work, and it is after 5 in certainly in Ireland. And thanks to everybody that registered. And feel free to reach out, ask us questions offline. Thanks for the time, Paul. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.